Another bonus for Zimbabwe itself, a chance to develop its tourism industry. Amongst the country's many attractions are the world-famous Victoria Falls, abundant wildlife, and a chance to see the Big Five in several national parks. Now, Zimbabwe's Minister of Tourism, Mr. Walter Mzembi, joins me now. Oh, welcome, Minister.
Thank you so much.
So, sanctions against Zimbabwe now lifted. What effect did they have on your country?
Well, first and foremost, they remove the bad boy tag on the country, which was placed on us in 2002 on the back of the invocation of Article 96 of the Cotonou Agreement between ACP countries and the European Union. What it did was basically accelerate the withdrawal of support for the country and reversing our image, which was flying at that time, doing very well. And the comeback now, through the revocation of Article 96, is basically a vote of confidence in all our political and economic processes in the country.
Okay. You talk about what was the effect on the country itself, on the people? Did it have an effect?
Well, like I've mentioned elsewhere, I can put overnight $100 billion invoice on the cost of sanctions to the EU. As it were, because
what difference did it make to the life of people, daily life?
It induced a lot of hardship on our people, hardship that has never been experienced. In fact, you saw us glide into serious hyperinflation at the peak of the impact of these sanctions. We even had a 240 million% hyperinflation percentage.
Zimbabwe was suffering hyperinflation before 2002, though, wasn't it? You say its image was flying high.
We didn't even have it in the scale that I'm sharing with you of 240 million%. That was a global record. Prior to that, we were on single-digit inflation. Now we are on almost deflation to single-digit under 5. Which is healthy. And
so the removal of these sanctions, what effect do you think that will have, again, on daily life in Zimbabwe?
Well, if it can come immediately with budgetary support, it would be welcome. But if it comes with further preconditions where we are again asked to respond to issues that are becoming clearly untangible or intangible, then it won't have an immediate impact on the lives of the poor. We want to move the bottom lot of our people into middle class. We have almost seen an expiry of our middle class, with many of our people going into the diaspora, becoming part of the brain drain, removing skills from an economy that otherwise at this stage really requires those skills. You saw the impact today of what diaspora support can do for a country. The British, by their own admission here in this country, they say they've benefited 20 billion.
You believe that the diaspora was caused by the brain drain caused by the sanctions?
Absolutely.
You don't believe that the diaspora was caused by the way that Robert Mugabe has ruled his country and oppressed it?
Absolutely not, because our children continue to come back home occasionally when they can afford a holiday, meaning that the conditions that exist at home, the political conditions are conducive enough for them to come and holiday. Yeah, so there's nothing really that is going to miss. In fact, we are Africa's most stable democracy today.
I'm sorry, you said there's nothing amiss in the country?
There's nothing amiss in the way of insecurity or the lack of peace and stability.
Yeah, because I'm just looking at the figures. Zimbabwe, life expectancy there is lowest anywhere in the world. As you say, you're suffering from hyperinflation.
These are statistics
serious human rights violations.
These are statistics that were being propagated by the EU on the back of the sanctions.
They weren't happening.
No, they weren't happening.
There are no human rights violations
absolutely,
in Zimbabwe.
In fact, to the extent that you only have to do the physical visit to Zimbabwe.
Just so we're clear, I'd just like to hear you say, so as far as you're concerned, no human rights violations in Zimbabwe?
It depends on your classification of human rights violations. They cite the return to rule of law. I was able last night to demonstrate to a class at Oxford that in Rhodesia there was no rule of law. So when you say we return to rule of law, what benchmark are you actually citing? Because we brought democracy into Zimbabwe in 1980 through multi-party expression. And,
let's give an example then. Just you say it depends. 2nd of October 2014, Amnesty International published a report in which they accused the Zimbabwean authorities of bulldozing the homes of the country's poorest residents in a series of forced evictions. Is that the sort of rule of law that you feel is, one, good for Zimbabwe, and two, good for this flying image, so that people will come and visit your country?
Go to Zimbabwe today, and you will see that we are probably a slumless country in that sense.
Well, you've just bulldozed them all down.
Basically, what we've done is replanning. There was nothing that was done to the extent where people were made homeless. We have a two-home system in the country, a rural home system.
Again, just so I'm clear. Yeah. So you bulldoze the houses down, you force the people out, but you say all these people had other homes to go to.
If a home is built in an undesignated place by local authorities, whether they are rural district council or local government, and it is built in an area where it cannot be serviced through basic provision of electricity and water, you cannot perpetuate its existence, because otherwise what you are exacerbating is the emergence of medieval diseases like cholera, dysentery, and so forth. So
you bulldoze them, and where do the people go?
They went to the rural areas.
To the homes in the rural areas?
Yes, to the alternative homes in our rural areas. And in fact, that was the beginning also of our land reform program. So we're able to take the majority of them onto new farmlands, and we resettled. We resettled 294,000 families.
And they're all resettled and
happy. They're all resettled and happy.
So you're the tourism minister, and you're hoping that lots of people will visit Zimbabwe for their holidays.
The brand is on the comeback now.
Your brand is on the comeback. Yeah. Where do you expect the tourists to come from?
They are coming from Europe. In fact, the majority of our tourists are coming from Europe and the United States of America, and I'm talking about the big spenders. It's USA and Europe collectively.
So you welcome them all?
Absolutely. We have an open door policy. Yeah.
Black ones, the white ones, the gay ones, the
Everybody is welcome in my country. We don't know people by their sexual preferences when they visit, because we don't knock into people's bedrooms.
No, which is fair enough, but your own president was talking early this month about how homosexuality is an aberration.
Well, it's enshrined in our constitution that we don't embrace it. We are a Christian state.
No. There's a difference between not embracing something and just downright denouncing it.
No,
you say that Zimbabwe is open to all, but if you turn up with if a guy turns up with his boyfriend or a woman turns up with her girlfriend, then they're going to get harassed in Zimbabwe.
They don't do that in our country. They respect our Christian values. Okay, and I've not seen them.
No, that's So they respect your Christian values. So when you say that,
which are enshrined in the Constitution,
absolutely. But when you say that everyone is welcome, they're not, if they are gay.
I haven't seen anybody who has been harassed for being gay, because when they enter our perimeters, when they enter our borders, they respect our Christian values. So they don't do it.
It's that, or they get shot or taken away by the police.
They don't do it to taunt us. Yeah, I think they respect our systems and our value systems in the country.
So you were saying that the country's image is on the up again.
Yes. And again, there are many things that have happened to attest to that.
But just looking at the sort of image that Zimbabwe has, I mean, you've got the beautiful falls and all the rest of it, but you also have the image of a repressive government that will brook no opposition. So how do you expect people from liberal democracies to sort of come and revel in what's going on there, especially as you have so much poverty?
A repressive government that regularly holds elections when they are due every 5 years. A repressive government that is so much space for opposition voices through an independent media. Or give me something else.
Well, let's talk about a
repressive government that is a 30% presence in its own parliament.
Elections when they are due. Suppresses the opposition and makes it well known that if you vote for the opposition, we know who you are and we will come and
a repressive government that has just come out of a unit government. Yeah. We were in a unit government for 5 years.
My point to you really is, it's all very well you sitting there saying that we do this, that and the other, but this is the image that Zimbabwe has. So you can sit there.
That's why exactly I'm here to correct that.
You can sit there and say no, but if out there it is yes, and we're seeing these images and we're hearing these stories, how do you counter that?
There are projects that have taken place in our country which attest issues to the contrary of what you are asking now. And just last year, we hosted the United Nations World Tourism Organization General Assembly, in itself an exercise in global endorsement of brand Zimbabwe. It was the biggest ever, with the 147 countries turning out to come and experience the product that I'm promoting and marketing here in the City of London. And they came and they were very impressed with our levels of hospitality, the peace and stability that obtains in the country, the security that we are able to guarantee. We arguably boast the least crime statistics in Southern Africa.
Which is lovely. It sounds lovely. I'd never go. Listen, we're going to be talking later about what's going on with Robert Mugabe's wife and the Vice President, Joyce Majura. Again, looking at your country from outside, it looks like it's a one-party state. It looks like it's run by a man who brooks no opposition, and that the slightest sign of opposition will crush that person. That is what looks like is going on now in Zimbabwe with what's going on between Joyce Majura and Grace Zimbabwe. Can you see how that's not a place that people would want to visit on holiday?
It is not Grace Zimbabwe, it's Grace Mugabe, Dr. Grace Mugabe, who is an equal right just like me and many other citizens back at home to express ambition for any office. In fact, she was invited to lead an organ in the party called ZANU-PF, called the Women's League. And she is even yet to be confirmed by the president himself. We still have to accede to the demands of women in Zimbabwe for her to lead the Women's League, an organ under ZANU-PF. To the extent that...
the difficulty, though, we'll just go back to the question I actually asked you, is that can you see the difficulty that tourists coming from liberal democracies would have with visiting a country which appears to be run by an autocratic ruler, which appears to brook no opposition, and which, when there is some sign of opposition, appears to want to crush it? Can you see why... Wait a minute. Can you see why people from those sorts of countries would hesitate to visit Zimbabwe?
But tourism statistics are not confirming what you are saying. I've just shared with you I'm really trying to get you to answer the question, though. Can you see why there would be a squeamishness? I mean, fine, the figures may be getting better, but can you see, as the Minister for Tourism, why there might be a squeamishness from people from liberal democracies at going to a country so rife with poverty that it has a political system that appears to be as I just described? Can you see why you might have a problem? I can understand your own reading of the situation based on what is mainstreamed to you by global media. But the experience on the ground which the tourists are being subjected to is a totally different one. It's a 100% hospitable experience. And fortunately with us, with the advent of IT, it has rubbished the negative travel advisories that certify destinations today in the world, because people are able to check independently for themselves whether they are being fed the truth by media platforms like CNN, BBC and others. And when they check independently for themselves a role which they have assumed, which is equivalent to being a travel agent and tour operator, through your cell phone, you can check all those things. They then make the decision to say, we are going and we're going to experience this Zimbabwe that we are seeing physically and checking for ourselves. And this is the paradox now behind the fact that the Americans themselves, the British, they constitute our highest source of arrivals, because your citizens here are disregarding the political messages that are being communicated by political administrations. They know that they are being lied to.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Zimbabwe's Minister of Tourism, Walter Mzembi.